Hey y'all, if you are a married believer trying to navigate this intimacy thing without shame, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you are in the right place.
If people have not lived through an affair, they believe that they know how they would react. And so, keeping that in mind, that everyone is giving you advice from their own perspective. Yeah, it's like, let's jump out of this plane and see if we can build a parachute on our way down.
Welcome to the space where we tell our truth. Testimony, healing, breaking shame loose. Learning our bodies and walking by faith. Intimacy, God's way, right here is the place. Sex ed for saints. Mondays at 6. We believe in the power of the story. Not just pain, but redemption and glory. Faith in the rhythm, hearts in the mix. Trust in educators. Mondays at 6. We're overcoming by the word of these testimonies. People getting free when we speak what's holy. Healing in our hearts, shame starts to split. Every story told, another chain gets stripped. Learning our bodies, learning His way. Intimacy and faith, walking day by day. This is where we heal, where the truth sticks. Sex ed for saints, Mondays at 6.
I'm so excited to finally share this book with you. Hey God, Can I is available now. Find the link in my bio to get your copy.
Before we get into the conversation, I do have questions that the audience typically ask. If you go to my Instagram, the Marriage Lab LLC, there is a link in my bio where you can ask anonymous questions that will be answered on the podcast. So if you ever have a question that you want answered by myself or one of my guests, please go there and ask your question and we will answer them on the podcast. And so for today's topic, we are speaking about infidelity, y'all. We're speaking about infidelity. And one audience member, they asked a very, very important question. And I want us to take an opportunity to read that question so that we can understand. It says, "My wife cheated on me, and we've decided that we're going to stay. And I'm really torn about something. Part of me feels like I need to know exactly what happened so I can heal and not imagine things. But the other part of me is scared of knowing all the details. Will it just hurt me more? I just keep replaying these things in my mind forever. I don't know where I land. Is it healthy to know all the details if you're choosing to stay in the relationship? Or is there a point where, knowing more is going to do more harm than good?" That is such an important question.
That is a very important question and a question I hear a lot. I love this feature. I love that people can give you questions. So
Yeah.
this is great. First of all, I'm just sorry that you're in this place, like having to face this unwinnable dilemma. Um, it 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 just kind of sucks to be in this place of rebuilding, but then having to make decisions about your future, having been hurt so much. People come down on different sides of this, and I have found that it is an individual decision how much you need to know. Once you know, you can't unknow. And so for some people, knowing all the details really is hard to live with. The other side of that is if your brain is going to make up stuff in the absence of information, then knowing more is helpful because then you can say, well, all right, this is what did happen instead of imagining what may have happened. Some people really need to know all the details. Other people need to um, know that it happened without feeding that internal that video that can play. Uh, I do think it's helpful to think in terms of you probably need to know what happened. You probably don't need to know every instance. So if you know that something happened and you know the details about one or two instances, do you need to know if there were 10 instances where the same thing happened? Like once you know that it happened, that's where the knowledge and the moving forward is, not necessarily in knowing that it happened and all the details of every single time something happened.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I definitely agree with that because I think that there is a level of safety that is going to, help individuals with knowing information, but you don't know what you don't need to know, right? But I think that there is an unhealthy version of knowing, as well as a safety version of knowing, because there are instances where you might ask something and it might lead to a traumatic response where you're replaying, and like you said, you start replaying things in your head over and over and over again, and that might be an unhealthy way to learn information. And so I think it's really a matter of what is it that you need to know that's going to make you feel safe to move forward and stay grounded within the relationship. I think those are very valid points that you made, and I think that that's how it is. Try to stay from trying to know too many details, but know enough information of what it is you need to know to make sure that you feel secure. Because I think that um, our brains want to protect us still, right? Our brain wants to protect us, and so it also wants to know information. So it's a matter of you individually, like you said. But I'm excited to get into this topic because there are so many people who are broken from infidelity within relationships and things like that. And so, Dr. Cherry, I want to first find out, a little bit more about you. Tell our audience a little bit about who you are.
I am a couple sex therapist and a relationship coach. They're kind of two different hats that look at a lot of the same things, but from a different perspective. I've been a couples therapist for over 20 years, and I was the only couples therapist in my region for a long time. Telehealth has really changed that, and as more therapists come up and are specializing in couples work. So I have really worked with just about every situation that a couple can throw at each other. I never say always, or I've seen all of, because there are always variations. There's always some new situation, and I'm like, I haven't really seen that one before. So I I have a lot of experience in working with couples. Um, Affairs, infidelity. This is one of the big themes that I see a lot. It's by no means the only theme. There's a lot of other things that bring couples to couples therapy.
That's so good. That's so good. I am excited to get into this conversation again because, as a therapist, I'm pretty sure, as you mentioned, you have seen countless scenarios where infidelity has taken a role within marriages. And one of the things that I find very often is that, a lot of people choose to stay in situations for various reasons. And if you do decide, there is a level of responsibility that comes with that. My first question for this is, how can you help us understand why this topic is so triggering for so many people who have never, especially those who have never even experienced infidelity?
Infidelity is one of the worst betrayals a person can live through. Even if the relationship breaks up, that impact is still there. Um, Betrayal is now looked at like it's. I've always said that the person who was betrayed experiences symptoms like PTSD. Well, we're finally at the point where it's falling under the umbrella of PTSD. So it so rocks your world that it cuts to the very core of who you are and your values. And there's this process that happens where you filter everything through the new information. So you think back to when you first met and how this new information shifts that, and when you committed to each other and how it shifts that, and anniversaries and wondering how this fit in to that anniversary and what you experienced then. So it really has the potential to rewrite your whole life.
Yeah, yeah, it really does. And to somebody who doesn't really understand, PTSD, help us to understand a little bit more about what that is and how infidelity plays a role into that.
PTSD is post traumatic stress disorder. It is a lasting reaction to a traumatic event. So, in the case of infidelity, it's typically the partner who was betrayed has PTSD symptoms. Occasionally, I will see partners who had the affair also have some PTSD symptoms. That's kind of a different variation on this. But what happens is you end up with the flashbacks, the hypervigilance, the anxiety, feeling keyed up, having trouble processing information, feeling disembodied, and your mind is trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The fact that infidelity can't even be classified in the category as someone with PTSD. I think that's very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the variations of infidelity, because a lot of people say, well, infidelity is only when I actually have an affair on my spouse, but there are different levels to affair. So what classifies as infidelity?
It's a tricky thing to define because the real answer is breaking an agreement in your relationship. That we have agreements with our partners and you crossed a line over into territory that was off limits. So for some couples, that is going to be strictly physical. For other couples, that's going to be emotional. For some couples, that could be even getting just emotional support or talking about your marriage. That can still have the same impact depending on where those boundaries are. One of the troubles is that couples don't define those boundaries very clearly at the beginning, or they'll agree kind of in the best circumstances. And then in practical application, they are walking away from those discussions with different interpretations of those boundaries. So sometimes a couple really will have a hard time agreeing on whether it was a breach or not. Especially when you talk about, is it an affair? Is it infidelity? Did you cheat? But if you instead talk about, was there an agreement here? Did you break the agreement? Then it's much easier to take accountability for that. So the labeling can affect the whole experience.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, as you mentioned, a lot of people don't really talk about boundaries, and what those crossing the boundaries would look like within the relationship. It's usually when something happens, right? Where they're like, hold on, wait a minute, this something is not adding up here. So how would someone in a relationship before they get married, what would that look like, that conversation in terms of like putting those boundaries together, so that these are things that they could be very aware of as they maneuver their relationship.
I think it's really healthy to talk about lots of different sorts of scenarios ahead of time. In this day and age, you also have to have some conversations that never would have happened before. Like, is it crossing a line to look at an OnlyFans page? Can you look? But what if you interact? What if you send some money? This is all off, like hands off. And then, like, what about a sex bot? Like, is talking to AI about a sexual situation, is that cheating, or is that, just exploring something? So having pretty specific conversations about what is okay for each of you, and then when you don't agree, finding that middle ground, maybe not middle ground. Some things you can find middle ground on. Other things you have to make sure that you're both on the same page about. Otherwise, there can be that misunderstanding or that misinterpretation that feeds into this. Now, most people know when they're crossing boundaries, but having very clear boundaries makes it easy to hold them accountable if they're doing things that maybe are questionable, but not necessarily as clear.
Yeah, I think that's so important, to be able to voice that so that you are clear on, what you feel is and is not appropriate. As well as, a lot of the community that we speak with, they're biblically grounded. And so how can we, integrate, biblical principles to help us align on, what is and is not appropriate. Because, if someone is biblically grounded, there's scripture that says, like, if you look at a woman with lust, then that is considered adultery. And so, like, if we apply these principles within, the conversations that we have, I think it really helps to give a more clear and distinct viewpoint to say, like, hey, if God is going to look at this as something that, we should not be able to do. So how can we implement these kind of conversations to make sure that we are biblically grounded in that?
I think that question about, I mean, you almost answered the question in the question. The idea that you have a higher power, you have a guideline that you can then hold your agreements up to and make sure that they not only meet your own standard and your partner's standard, but this higher standard of where do we put that line. I was talking about this with a couple this week about this idea of, if your spouse were standing next to you or they were reading over your shoulder, is it something that you would still do? And having that as one of their boundaries or their guidelines as to how to decide whether something was acceptable or not. And when you look at this from a biblical standpoint, thinking about, well, this is something that God can see. So would this be something, if he were standing over your shoulder, you'd be like, yay, I'm really feeling proud of this? Or is that something you say that's not really good? I don't feel good about that.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I want to ask, because I mean, people, they have infidelity for various reasons. Why do you think a lot of infidelity happens? I mean, we could go on forever with this, but in your opinion, based off of, the conversations that you have, why do you think people, cheat on their spouses?
There are a lot of reasons that people cheat. Some of them have to do with their spouse, some of them have to do with their own personal self. When there's a problem in the relationship, both partners are responsible for the problem in the relationship. They're responsible for how they handle that. There's lots of unhealthy ways of handling problems: shutting down, eating, talking to friends, complaining to friends, using drugs or alcohol to numb out, being conflict avoidant. So having an affair is one of the unhealthy ways that they can deal with that. So I feel like there's two levels to why they have an affair. A couple can have pre-existing problems in the relationship that one partner feels is justified or opens the door to that affair. They're still responsible for the affair. They're both still responsible for how the relationship goes. Now, this isn't always the case. There are times when people have an affair and there's not problems in the relationship. And those are more like self-discovery or affirmation or fulfilling something, novelty or risk. Like, there's lots of other things that are just about that one partner. But to have a good relationship, you need to bring those problems back to your partner and find a way of solving them in a way that keeps the relationship safe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of people are not really confronting the issues that they really have. And even if you're having issues, it should not lead to infidelity. But unfortunately, sometimes that is the result of not dealing or handling the issues that you have. How would you say that someone could kind of, catch these things early on? Because it doesn't just happen. Like, infidelity is one of those where there's a process to it. So, like, in your professional opinion, like, how do you catch these things very early on?
One of the ways of avoiding this is to have really good communication with the partner where you can talk about really, really tough things and be able to work that through. So if you're in a good place and you want to stay in a good place, it's really improving that communication, bringing up really hard topics, sticking with the hard topic, even if one of you is uncomfortable with the conversation, and just continuing to stay open to each other. being able to talk about, this is my perspective, this is your perspective, and being curious about that and not jump to, well, what does that mean for me? Or how is that threatening me? Now, beyond that, looking for those signs that something is off, shifts in behavior, shifts in attitude, shifts in time. If your partner has been open in the past and they start hiding things or acting differently, those are signs that something is happening. Maybe it's not infidelity. The other thing to consider is opportunity. You know, I know a lot of situations where there was some problem in the relationship, and it really was the opportunity to have an affair that led to the affair. And if that opportunity had not been there, then maybe they would have dealt with it in a different way. Still maybe unhealthy, but wouldn't have been that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting, that point with the opportunity, because that's also letting you know, well, how how do I want to say this? That lets you know how strong that individual is in that moment as well. The level of how they would take advantage of an opportunity if it does present itself lets them know that there is really a bigger problem that needs to be resolved. A lot of people decide that they want to stay within these relationships, as the audience member who asked their questions. What are some things that, if someone does decide to stay within a situation where infidelity has occurred, I want to ask, how should they know whether or not they should stay, or whether or not they should not stay within that relationship?
Most people believe that they know what they would do if there was an affair before it happened, and they're usually pretty clear. The reality is that the best statistics that we can find are that 60% of couples affected by an affair stay together. Now, if you think about that statistic, if the divorce rate is 50%, it means that couples who have affairs stay together more often than the average number, just across the board. Now, I would not advocate having an affair to divorce proof your relationship. That's not how this works. But it is important to realize that when push comes to shove, more couples stay together after an affair than break up. We don't talk about this much, so people don't know that other people around them have gone through this and have survived it. Um, Making that decision is a personal decision, and both partners have to decide that they want to work through this. Some of the determining factors are, has the affair stopped? Is the person who had the affair, are they able to take accountability for that? Are they able to help their partner heal? And then, can the betrayed partner, can they see a possibility where they could forgive this? Now, forgiveness doesn't always mean forgets. If you forget, then you don't always change behavior. And sometimes there are safeguards that need to be put in place to make sure that it's still safe for both partners. Those are the things that I would start with in terms of deciding whether they want to stay or not.
That's really good. Because one of the things that I find is, when someone does feel betrayed, they go immediately to, how could they do this to me? Or then the insecurities start coming, in terms of feeling like they did something wrong. I thought that was some very good statistics that you brought up, where 60% of individuals are not, are, well, actually are staying within, their relationships. Why do you think people don't voice this when it happens?
There's so much shame and there's so much indecision. One of the things that I recommend is that people not make a decision immediately after they learn about it. That's when you're more likely to make a decision that you haven't thought through, that you haven't kind of weighed all the pieces of it to figure out what is the best outcome. And afterwards, there doesn't come a point where you lose the ability to make that choice. So if you give it a couple of weeks or you give it a month, putting safeguards in place so that you feel safe. Sometimes that means a couple needs to separate for a little while so that they can have that safety. Other couples just pause. They can deal with the crisis and then get to a place where they maybe are ready to make that decision. But giving that time means that they can think from that rational, logical side of their brain that can weigh out which direction to go in.
That's really good. That's really good. And I'm thinking about that. And I know everyone's timing is going to be different, but when it comes to time, what does that typically look like from like a general perspective?
This is really, really tough. The person who had the affair is always going to be ready to move on before the betrayed partner. They lived it, it was in context, they had time to process it, it made sense to them on some level by the time their partner learned about it. Their partner is starting from ground zero when they learn about it. And so they still have to do all of that processing, all of that understanding. And there's that betrayal, that trauma factor associated with it. The amount of time it takes to get over that depends on how deep that betrayal is. So you might have, just some inappropriate texting. That is going to be a different trajectory than, having a multi-year affair that you're trying to recover from. Now, that being said, for some people, that what seems like a small crossing of the boundaries can be just as damaging as that bigger. And so it really depends on the couple. You're going to have a lot of other factors like anniversaries can kick up a lot of the same feelings as when it first came out. So you might work through it, get into that year point, things seem like the trust is repaired, there's a lot of safety and guardrails set up, and then you hit that anniversary and it feels like you're back at the beginning. You got to work through that as well. And so it's not like something that goes away. You get much, much better at handling these kind of crises and the triggers that cause them.
I love that because, it doesn't just go away and there are triggers. And so I want to ask really quickly, like, how do you recognize triggers and what are some tools that individuals can use to handle them when they do come?
Triggers are normal. And in the beginning, they are all the time, all the time. One of the questions I like to have partners ask each other is to have the partner who had the affair ask the betrayed partner, how often are you thinking about this?
Mm.
And most of the time, they're really shocked at how often it is. In the beginning, it makes sense that it's all the time. You can be 6 months out and they may still be thinking about it 2, 3, 4 times a day. And then you get further out and you think, okay, we're functioning much better. Things are going well. We seem to have moved forward with it. This may still be popping up once a week for them. So like understanding how those are popping up is helpful in the recovery process. And then once you recognize a trigger, that is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow together as you deal with this crisis. So when the person who is triggered, they need to bring that up to their partner in a neutral way, not a blaming, you did this isn't fair, but saying like, I'm triggered, I need some help here. And that becomes an opportunity for the other partner to be an agent of healing. And when they're an agent of healing, then they can deal with it together and their relationship strengthens as they go through this recovery process.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Because I want to talk a little bit about, because as they're going through their triggers and, they have the help of their, spouse, the one who has committed the offense. What if they're in a situation where their spouse is not cooperative? Then how then do they, navigate through that?
That would be a red flag that maybe they can't move past this. If if your partner consistently shuts down or lashes back out or becomes super defensive and consistently does it, not sometimes they can't handle it, but consistently can't step into that space where they're helping you heal, then that may be a sign that you're not going to be able to recover from this. With the reminder that helping you heal doesn't mean they're supposed to take it. A lot of couples get into this dynamic where they're like, well, you hurt me, you betrayed me, you need to just take whatever I dish out. And that is not particularly healing. That can be as destructive as um, the boundary crossing is in the initial crisis of all of this.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good because you have to figure out a way to, even though you've been impacted, you still have to figure out a way to be healed without, also being traumatized in the process, right? I think that's the right way to say it. By keep bringing it up and saying, "You owe me this, you owe me that." That's not really healing, is it?
It's not, and it is justified. They were betrayed. So on the one hand, yes, they can own that space as long as they need to. But if you plan on staying together, there has to come a point where you see that you have to work together on this healing. Now, that does not mean that the betrayed partner does all of the healing and all of the work and it's their responsibility. Their partner needs to step into that uncomfortable space with them and be supportive and be understanding and be empathetic. Sometimes I'll talk about that role like you need to put your best friend hat on. Like, what would you do if you were their best friend and they had been betrayed by their partner? Like, that's where the healing is really being in that space of seeing you have a different role.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I love that because you have to be friends. You got to get back there at least. At least. I want to ask because it's difficult when you are in that space. And so, how does that in turn impact intimacy when you know that your spouse has been, violating this sacred space? Like, how does that impact the bedroom?
I've seen two distinct patterns. Some couples start being intimate at a much higher rate. It's almost like they need to reaffirm all the time that they are together and they're going to meet each other's needs. And so sometimes you see that really skyrocket, which you would think that's a little bit counterintuitive. The other pattern is that it just cuts it off. There's too many blocks in the way to be really close and vulnerable with a partner. So the intimacy gets shut down. And it might get shut down across the board, or even a hug or a kiss just feels awful to the betrayed partner. It can be limited to parts of intimacy. So it depends on the couple.
I think that's very interesting. Those two various dynamics. Are any of those like unhealthy or healthy? Like, how do we measure that? Like, what is healthy, what is not healthy? Because if somebody's listening and they're thinking, oh, if I want to overcompensate by being intimate, even though my heart is not really there, but I'm doing it as a way because I want to reassure myself. Like, is that a healthy perspective, or like, how does that work out?
It's more unhealthy at the extremes. So it's why are you doing it? For some couples, learning about an affair is a real wake up call, and they see their partner differently than they did before learning about the affair. And in that case, this may just be a reigniting of the passion that had been set aside or had been dwindling. And that can be a pretty positive thing. Now, having intimacy because you are trying to convince your partner that they shouldn't leave you, or that you can meet their needs, or you don't want them to go wander somewhere else, that can be really hard. It's not something that you can maintain over a long period of time. Then on the other extreme, cutting off all intimacy, um, it does keep you safe. It allows time to rebuild, to figure out how to be vulnerable with each other. But it also denies you the comfort that can come with intimacy. And you've already lost so much, it can be another loss to then lose that comfort. So it's really the extremes and the unhealthy thoughts that go with it that determine whether it's helpful or not.
That's so good. That is so good. I want to talk a little bit about, forgiveness and what that looks like in a situation of infidelity. Um, let's talk about that.
When trust is broken, it can be rebuilt. Trust is rarely at 0% or 100% for anything. And when we trust our spouse, it isn't just do we trust them with other people, it's also do we trust them with our money? Do we trust them with our home? Do we trust them with our kids? Do we trust them to be there for us? And so you always have multiple factors of trust that then are at a level that are rarely at 0% or 100%. Now, many couples give their partner kind of this cone of trust that once they establish the relationship and they've proven that they're trustworthy, they almost blindly, naively, innocently, I don't know what the right word is there, give that trust and assume that they're going to be trustworthy until they're not. And that is fine, but all of our partners, every one of them, has the capacity to hurt us this way. So you can think about that, you can not think about that, but that is still fundamentally there. So when I think about rebuilding that trust, we're trying to increase the rate of that trust. I don't know that most couples get to 100% trust. Knowing that your partner can hurt you this way may mean that none of us should be at 100% trust. Maybe 99% trust is where we really need to be.
Yeah.
But that repaired trust looks like building that and getting as close to 100% as you can.
Yeah, I love that because repairing trust is going to take time to get to that, 100%. It's going to take a lot of time. And I absolutely love that. So, how can someone who is unfaithful and trying to come out of that space support, the healing of their spouse, essentially?
The, the biggest concepts are openness and transparency.
Hmm.
Being open, being above board, being honest about what you're doing, and then transparent, like your partner has the ability to check. Those are the two biggest components that help rebuild trust. So every time you are where you say you're going to be and you do what you say you're going to do, and you tell your partner before they find out something, even if it's not about this particular issue, you are putting like little drops of trust into your trust bucket. And it does take a while for that trust bucket to get filled. And every time you hide something, sometimes you just forget something that's important and you don't tell it. Anytime there's a crisis, you run the risk of kicking that trust bucket over. And so you want to be trustworthy in all situations, not just around this issue.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I I've encountered couples where, they've experienced on one hand, one is very transparent, giving them those lemon drops and, building that trust spank up again. And then there are some who just don't. Um, how can a couple work to, and the reason why they didn't, let me just say this, the reason why they said that they didn't was because they didn't want to bring back up those feelings again, because in their minds they felt as if going over the trauma was reliving it, and they were like, well, I'm done. I'm not cheating anymore. I don't want to go through this again. Let's just move past it. What would you say to that couple right there? Like, who, you have one couple who's like, I'm not cheating anymore. You're just gonna have to believe me, right? And then the other spouse as well, I need to be reassured. Like, how do they move past that in those kind of cases?
This is where that question where you have the one partner ask the other partner, how often are you thinking about this? Really is helpful. If your partner is thinking about this all the time, if you're the partner and you're thinking about this all the time, and your partner does not bring it up, all they are doing is letting you deal with this on your own. Now, think about, you're the one who's trying to repair things. Your partner, they are dealing with this on their own. Do you really want them to be coming to their own conclusions and dealing with this on their own and feeling abandoned and feeling like you hurt them and now you're not willing to help them heal? Like, that's just a losing proposition. If you like, that hands-off approach says, I'm just going to let you come to your own conclusions.
Yeah.
That is not going to be a good scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think the reason why they would approach the situation like that is because they know how much hurt that they've brought on their spouse, and it's a response for them to basically say, I don't want to be reminded of how bad I've hurt you?
Yeah, they are protecting themselves in that scenario. Now, they don't want to be faced with the feelings that come with it. They might have embarrassment and disappointment. They might have shame, some guilt. Like, that can feel terrible, terrible to feel.
Yeah.
And yet, if you say, well, that's in the past, we're done with that.
Mm-hmm.
What all you're doing is leaving that for your partner to deal with, which may feel like another betrayal to them.
Yeah. That's powerful. Do you think after infidelity has happened that a marriage can feel safe again?
Yeah, I have worked with couples many times that once you get through it, not while you're in it, and I mean through it like a year later, they look back and realize that they had been coasting or just existing with each other, and that crisis represented a turning point for them. Again, I do not recommend this as a way to revitalize your marriage. It would be much better if you went to your spouse and said, I think we're off track. I think we need to do something to make a big change here. Let's work on this. Let's listen to a podcast together. Let's go to a retreat. Let's go to therapy. Let's figure out how to really, truly meet each other's needs. That would be much healthier. But the crisis makes couples take stock and figure out what they weren't doing, what they were letting slide. And so it often becomes a wake-up call where things actually get much better. Not in the immediate situation, but down the road, you actually address the things that you haven't been addressing.
Yeah, and I think that's so good. I think that's so good because it's almost like it's forced. It's almost like it's forced. It forces you to address the things that you didn't want to address before, and now you're like, roadblock.
Yeah, it's like, let's jump out of this plane and see if we can build a parachute on our way down.
That's a really good analogy.
Hey, friends, quick pause in this lesson because I need to put you onto something that has been blessing so many households. This episode has been sponsored by Covenant Eyes, the accountability app that helps you protect your eyes, your mind, and your marriage. If you're serious about keeping your digital life pure, guarded, and God honoring, Covenant Eyes is a game changer. It helps you to stay accountable online and creates a safe space for your heart and your home. And listen, because you are a part of the Marriage Lab, You get 30 days free when you use my code Marriage Lab. So go ahead, take that step, cover your devices, and cover your covenant.
Destruction completely.
Well, it is or die, it puts all the cards on the table. And immediately after discovery, couples often will have honest conversations that they have avoided for years. That if
Mhm.
they just had the honest conversations, they would have dealt with the things and they didn't have to jump out the plane or jump off the cliff to get there.
Right. Yeah. And I want to stress that really quickly because you did mention, a lot therapy and things like that. Um, there are many couples who don't feel like they need outside parties to help them with their, you know, scenarios. So how would you speak to those couples?
I wrote a workbook for the partner who had the affair to take full
Mhm.
accountability and then what to do with that accountability so that they can heal the relationship. So,
Mhm.
therapy is just one method
Mhm.
of doing that. You probably need some outside information, a book, listening to a podcast, something that helps you see the stuff that you couldn't see
Mhm.
that got you into that situation. But there are many ways of healing that relationship. When you asked me about helping your partner heal, I talked about openness and transparency. Well, there are a lot of other tools that could be used to rebuild that trust. Those are just the two most powerful, straightforward,
Mhm.
understandable from the get go. But you
Mhm.
repair the relationship in many different ways, not
Mhm.
just in that one way.
I love that. I love that. I love that you wrote a workbook for that, and I'll definitely put the link, in the comment section so that people will have opportunity to purchase that. Because what you're basically saying is, if you don't feel like the need to bring in a therapist, there are tools that you can use on your own that'll help you navigate along the way. And I love that.
Just make sure that most people end up bringing in someone else,
Mm-hmm.
friend, a mentor, a family member. Just make sure that person can stay aligned with your goals. Your
Mm-hmm.
best friend may be looking to exact some pain on
Mm-hmm.
someone. They are not the person who's going to be helpful in terms of rebuilding and thinking about what this means and making the best decision for you.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I want to go back really quickly because we were talking about, some of the impacts of infidelity on what it does to the one who has been impacted by it. Um, in terms of how to build that confidence back up again, so that they're not feeling like insecure and those various layers, what are some tools that they could use to help them navigate their process so that they can be a little bit more confident in themselves and understand that it's not really their fault.
After discovery, usually what happens is someone is so overwhelmed and so overcome that they kind of shut down or they go into rage. And what they really need to be doing is making sure that their self care is top notch. Like you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to get exercise, you need to engage with your kids and take care of them. You need to do the things that help you stay grounded and operate at your best, which is going to feel like the worst possible thing to do. But it's still the thing that helps you make good decisions and really see what's there and not over personalize, not put all of the responsibility on the other partner if there were things that you did that kind of contributed to it. And those things are really nuanced and really hard to pull out. So the very first thing is like make sure you're taking good care of yourself.
Yeah, I love that because I didn't even think about it, but when you said it, make sure that you eat. There are a lot of people who just stop taking showers, they stop eating, they lose a sense of themselves. And you really do have to rebuild yourself back up when you have been, in a situation where you feel broken. So thank you for that information. I know we've been on this call for, almost an hour. And so I want you to talk really quickly to the person who is in a situation right now where their heart feels torn. What would you want them to know regarding their situation right now?
First of all, you're not alone. There are a lot of people around you who have gone through exactly this, whether they're talking about it or not. Second, your self care matters. Like, make sure you drink some water, get out, spend some time with some people, don't isolate yourself. That is what you're going to want to do. And you probably don't want to go and do all the things you were doing before, but make sure that you have some level of just taking care of yourself so that you can function, doing the things that help you feel grounded. And then give yourself some space. Even if the other partner wants you to make a decision right away, they may even be putting a lot of pressure on you that you have to make a decision, which is a little ironic since they created the situation, but they're so uncomfortable in the situation that they put a lot of pressure on. You got to make a decision. Just give yourself some space to think, to talk, to meditate or pray, to connect with others, to make that decision for yourself from a good place. And then once you're clear on that, then making those steps to make whatever those changes are. So it kind of slows down the process so that you don't get stuck in places and then can't move forward. So slowing down to not get stuck, I know that sounds contradictory, but like, you're still a person. You still deserve to take care of yourself and to have your needs met.
I love that. I love that. And I want to speak really quickly because there are going to be some who are in relationships and they're going to go back to, I want this relationship to go back to the way that it was. Um, is that even possible?
It is possible. Is it wise? You're already older and wiser. You've already grown because you've gone through this. Can things go back to the way they were? Maybe, but you have to heal the injury. And you don't want it to like scab over and get scar tissue, but then underneath there's all this pus. So there are couples who move through this much more easily. Maybe it even makes sense that the partner made this choice. Maybe it's not as big of a breach and they can move past it fairly quickly and things go back to normal. I would really encourage you to pause a moment and say, what's it going to be like in 5 years if we step past this? Am I really going to be able to trust that when they say they're going to run an errand, that's actually what they're doing with their time? Or am I still going to be stuck in that questioning and that distrust? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's much better to do that work now than to let that go on.
That's really good. That's really good. It takes time. Ultimately, what you are explaining is that it takes time to build that relationship back up again. And like you mentioned, it's not wise. It's wiser to use the maturity that you have and apply that so that you can have a more productive, a more healthier marriage. I want to kind of wrap up because we have been on for we could talk about the subject all day. Like, I didn't even realize the time went by so quickly. But is there anything that I didn't ask that you would want someone to know who is in a situation that they're like, I'm still trying to decide, I'm still on the fence?
Still trying to decide is a very reasonable stance to take. And staying in that space may feel safer than once you decide one way or the other. So that's okay. Let yourself stay there as long as you need to. In terms of recovering from the infidelity or any other breach for that matter, you probably have some resources that you can pull on. some supports or some coping strategies that you used before, and you should use those. Don't cut yourself off from the things that give you comfort. Also, don't be rash and do something that is not in your integrity that you are later going to regret. Sometimes people think, well, if I do the same thing, then we'll be even, or this gives me license to call them anything that comes to mind. And later, you're still accountable for the way you handled this. So making sure to keep choices that make choices that are in line with your own integrity.
I love that because, when you are going through a situation, sometimes you don't know how you're going to respond. And so, what you're essentially saying is take a moment and pause before you react.
Yeah, know that you're still going to have to look yourself in the mirror and say, did I do what was in line with my values?
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of people or many people who are in situations where infidelity has occurred. They feel like they don't have anyone to talk to. How important is it to have support as they are navigating their process?
Most people need one person who they can be honest with.
Hmm.
Now, one of the mistakes that couples sometimes make is that the person who learned of the betrayal, they will go and tell lots of people, and they will feel like it's a way of holding their partner accountable.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's okay. You need to have the foresight to know whether you're going to regret that later. And there are going to be people that you wish you hadn't told.
Yeah.
So that's a hard call. But most
Mhm.
people need one person that they can just be completely honest with so that they feel supported and don't feel so alone as they go through it.
Yeah, yeah, which is very important because how do you safeguard that when you are communicating with people? Because now you have so many different ears, telling you so many different things. So, how do you safeguard that to make sure that you can understand that you're making clear decisions and not being influenced by others?
Well, if people have not lived through an affair, they believe that they know how they would react. And so, keeping that in mind that everyone is giving you advice from their own perspective, from
Mm-hmm.
their own value set, from their own uh, lived experience, having lived or having not lived. And so, balancing that as you hear it and knowing that you have to make the best decision for you regardless of what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that, as you're doing the self-care and the healing and all that you need to, make yourself more secure, it'll help you to make more grounded decisions so that you're not so easily influenced. So I love that. I love that. So Dr. Sherry, I appreciate you, having this conversation. It was so insightful. I know that the conversation is going to be so beneficial to many. So share with us a little bit about where they can find you on social media, things like that.
Yeah, I'm all over the place. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and Pinterest, and I don't know, all the places, the big places. Um, I have I have two business accounts. So I have my therapy, that's Couples Counseling Center, and then I have my coaching practice, which if you're outside of my licensed area, you're looking for coaching. That would be the way I could help, and that would be at Synergy. Uh, Everything is Synergy Coaching.
Okay, thank you for that information.
Can I mention my Facebook group?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the places that people can find me is in my Facebook group. It's called Date Night Community, and it is geared towards long-term couples who want to stay committed and close and have that really good relationship over time. So if you're looking for resources, I post questions to use on your date every week so that you talk about more than just the basic topics and can keep that relationship really alive.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you again, Dr. Sherry, for coming on the Sex Ed for Saints podcast. You are giving very valuable lessons to individuals on how to get through, how to handle, how to deal, when infidelity arises within their circumstance. And so I appreciate that. And for those who are listening in, just know that it is not the end all be all when you are in situations when infidelity has happened. You can heal through, as well as you don't have to stay. You don't have to stay in toxic situations, as well as if you do decide, there is a process to getting through it, and you don't have to stay there forever. You can get back to happiness. And Dr. Sherry has absolutely shared tools that you can use to get you there. And so, Dr. Sherry, is there anything that you want to say to close out? Any message to the audience?
I really want to thank you for letting me come and talk to all of you. I think that this is a really important topic, and no matter what you decide, take care of yourself.
I love that. I love that. And so thank you all for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time. Bye.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Now, friends, if this conversation blessed you, do me a favor. Take a moment to leave a review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, because you already know we need more faith-filled, real conversations like this in the world. And listen, I know you heard a gem today, something that made you pause, something that made you think, something that made you say, woo, this was for me. But friend, it might not be just for you. So go ahead and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to a friend, a spouse, a sister in Christ, somebody who's been feeling stuck or silent in this area. Let's spread healing, freedom, and truth one conversation at a time. And until next time, we're going to get candid, but keep it God. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.